Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. My guest today is Lori Alspaugh. Lori, how are you?
I'm so happy to be here, TC. I can't wait to get started with this.
Well, let's jump right in. I'm so glad you're here. The first thing that I do on this show is I love to invite my guests to introduce themselves. So a lot of shows, the host will introduce the guest, which I think is great, but I always want to hear directly from my guests. So if you could just tell folks a little bit about kind of who you are and what you do.
Okay. My name is Lori Alspaugh, and I am an author that writes under the pen name Lore Wren. And that was the first time I've ever said I'm an author. I've said I write books, but I've not said I'm an author. So I saved that for you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. How did it? I was going to ask, how did it feel? Like
it just rolled off the tongue naturally. So I guess I'm where I'm supposed to be.
That's amazing. I remember the first time that I said, I didn't use the word author, but the first time I said I'm a writer, it felt it felt weird, but it also felt really, really natural. And it was kind of like I don't know, for me, it was just like a burden off my shoulders to actually say it out loud. So that's so cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. So tell me a little bit, this podcast is not going to go into the weeds about your work that you're working on, but tell me a little bit about the book and kind of what gave you that idea to write that one.
Yeah, well, I studied art and have worked in the arts or education my entire career. I worked for an opera company, I worked for an art museum, an art gallery, an arts college at a university, and I currently run a foundation that provides funding for students to go through school with emergency funds, just anything to get them through school. So I've kind of grown up thinking about the underdog and helping the underdog. And it just was a natural thing for me to want to dive more into writing. I've written, like you say, you're a writer. I've felt like I've been a writer for a long time. I've written grants. I've written stories about students we've helped. I've written speeches. I've written newsletters. I write. But I think there's a difference between writing and being an author. And so I'd help other people write. I'd help students write applications for scholarships and essays, all these things. And I thought, well, I've really helped a lot of people do a lot of things. What is it I want to do? This is clearly something I'm good at, is telling a story. So I thought, well, someday I'm going to tell a story. I don't know when, but someday I'll tell a story. That's kind of how I got there. That's
awesome. And your story, what is your story all about?
Well, my story is a retelling of the Medusa myth, kind of the myth before the monster. Again, I've seen in my normal career a lot of bad things happen to really good people. And I kind of just wondered, why do some really good people have these horrible things happen to them? And what does it take for them to overcome these obstacles? And sometimes it's just somebody believing in you, somebody saying you can do it, somebody pointing you in the right direction, someone giving you a start. You don't know what's going to make it tick, but you just know you need to kind of plant that seed. And I was staring at the stars one night and I was looking at the constellations and I was noticing that Perseus and Andromeda and Pegasus all shared a star. And I thought, well, that's weird. I mean, Pegasus is Medusa's child, really, from Zeus. And I'm thinking all these weird things. I'm like, wow, what if Perseus actually loved Medusa and he just killed her to save her? And I'm like, this is crazy. So, I mean, these things I'm just like going down rabbit holes in my brain.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe Medusa isn't so bad. Kind of just put it aside. Didn't really think about it much more. It would pop in every now and then. And, I think every great artist, I'll say an authors are artists, you have a catalyst that kind of propels you into doing that next thing.
Yeah.
And that was always interesting to me. Like, what makes people take that leap of faith and just say, I'm going to do it? And I was waiting around for mine. What's next when you, I'm a mom as well to 2 kids. And when you're raising kids, 10 years goes by in a blink of an eye and you think, what happened? What did I do? I mean, it was the greatest entertainment of my life. But honestly, 10 years went so quickly, and I've put all this effort into building these humans. Well, I should probably do something for myself. So I decided to write a book.
So you were literally looking up at the night sky and you had this idea of like that. I think that's such a cool picture of like the pieces starting to come together as you're like contemplating the night sky. Like that's pretty amazing.
That really, I mean, that's been in my mind for a while. Like, before you had TV and before you had all internet and all these things, you were just literally staring at the stars and making up stories. I think that's such a cool thing. So many mythologies come from the sky.
Right.
It's a natural thing. And so I thought, well, I'll just stare at the sky for a while and see what I come up with. And that's one. I've come up with several, some good, some not so good, but that's one that kind of stuck with me.
Love it.
Yeah. So I going through life and wondering, what hits you to make you do something great. I think you kind of have to fall down before you go up. And it's when you go down, you think it can't get worse, and it does. And then you're like, okay, where am I going and how am I getting up? And for me, it was my mother passed away, and I ran from grief. I ran to Mexico with some friends. I ran to Oregon with some friends. I ran to Italy with my daughter. And that was another moment of an aha moment, I would say, was a trip to Pompeii.
Yeah. Okay. So you start, you have these catalyst moments, and then you decide at some point it becomes more than just an idea. You start taking action on the writing, right? So talk to me about, and I think you shared a little bit in our pre-conversation about the unique circumstances of the mechanics of the writing. You didn't sit down at a desk with an outline and all of that. Like, talk about how you started writing the book.
I will. So I started on a trip to Italy. I went to Pompeii. The historian who gave the tour was so good. I mean, I left there and I was tasting volcanic air, and I was feeling the moment so completely. And there was a statue of the two lovers that died in an embrace. And I went back and, gosh, I wonder if they were good people. Why'd they die like that? Clearly they loved each other. What do I love so much that I would die for? Thinking about those things, and why do bad things happen to some really good people? So just thinking about that. And I just wrote, when I was at Pompeii, I was walking, of course, down these cobblestone roads, and I found a feather. And my mother had always told me she'd send a feather for me when she got to have it. So I'm like, wow, okay, Mom. So I take a picture of that feather, and I'm in the moment, then I'm out of the moment, I'm eating ice cream, I'm whatever. But I'm back in my room later on that night, and I look at my phone and I see that picture of that feather. And so I open up my notes section, I put the feather in there, and I wrote, why do bad things happen to good people? And didn't think about it. I go home, I'm sitting there, my son plays hockey, and I'm at practice for hours at hockey, and I feel like I'm wasting my time. I don't need to tie his skates anymore. My purpose is literally just to sit there until he's done. It's 3 hours. What am I going to do with my time? So I started walking, and I started thinking about the story, thinking about this feather, thinking about Medusa. And I opened up the notes section on my phone, and I just started writing. Chapter 1, bird's eye. What is this? And I just keep writing and writing and writing. And I'm at the rink 3 or 4 days a week, 3 hours at a time. I've got 12 hours. I can write a lot of words in 12 hours in the snack shop with a blanket, watching hockey sometimes and writing. So that's what I did. I wrote the entire book in my phone.
That's amazing. And so how long, if you remember, how long did it take you from the first, like, kind of start hacking it out with your thumbs to like having what you feel like is a finished draft? Like, how long did that take?
So I started in June of last year.
Okay.
And I finished it in October.
Wow.
So it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
I downloaded the software Scrivener. I'm researching. What do? I don't know what to do. I have an idea. I don't know how to write a book. I'm trying to figure it out. So I downloaded Scrivener, and I set it up, and I never wrote a thing in it because by the time I get home, I was so exhausted, I couldn't do it. So I'm like, well, I mean, why can't I write this in the phone? I think I'll just do it in the phone. So I had it all. when I started transcribing it, I started deleting it, and I'm like, well, I don't think I'm going to delete that. I think I'm just going to leave this in my phone. And when I finally did get to the point of, because I didn't realize that notes wasn't like Word where I could just copy and paste it somewhere. I'd actually type it all back in. I'm like, oh, great. So I'm typing it all back in, and my actual writing days on the software was 52 days.
Okay.
From start to finish.
Wow. That's awesome.
But months of work and 52 days of putting it in there, and then, oh my goodness, lots of work after that.
That's amazing. So you talked earlier about kind of catalyst moments and inspiration for your writing, and how these ideas of kind of, it seems like you've been writing really for a big part of your life, but only recently have stepped into kind of what you consider the author role. But one of the things you said during that early part of our conversation too was around kind of support and encouragement from other people. So I'm curious, and as you've kind of gone through your writing journey, has there been, if you could you point to a moment where maybe someone has said or done something to you that has been something you would point to and say, wow, that was such an encouragement to hear from that person, or maybe a gift that someone got you or something like that? Is there something you could point to?
Sure. There's two very prominent things that I think about. Once was a 7th grade English class, and the teacher had us write and recite a poem. I don't remember what my poem was about, but I wrote it and I recited it. She goes, oh my goodness, you're going to a writing conference with me? And I was this very, very, very shy, nerdy girl. I didn't want to go in front of anybody for anything, but for whatever reason that day it worked. And I went to this conference and I started writing, and I couldn't share the intimate things I was thinking about that day as a 13-year-old girl. I just froze, and I didn't want to say another word. And she took me aside and she said, when you're ready, your voice will be heard. I know you're not ready yet. I'm so glad you came, yada, yada. It made me feel really good.
Yeah.
And she didn't make me feel like I disappointed her, which I really appreciate now. I wish I knew where she was, because I would thank her, because she did give me that spark of joy, saying, not yet, but someday.
Wow.
This is good. And then my dad, quite the character, he would say growing up, I would be terrified to do things, absolutely terrified. I just wanted to be home with my parents. And he'd say, all right, now what's the worst thing that could happen? And I'd think of some, I'm going to break my arm, and I'm going to not be able to do whatever it is I want to do. And he said, okay, so say that happens. What, could you get up the next morning? Well, yeah, I'd get up. He's like, well, then you ought to do it. And so that stuck with me too with this. There were moments where I thought, what am I doing? I need to throw this away. This is trash. I can't keep going. Why do I think I can do this? It's very hard. I didn't realize how hard it was to organize your thoughts in a succinct way so that someone else can understand them. It's a different beast. And so I have that moment where I'm literally crushed, walking out of work, stomping, saying I'm done with this. I can't figure out how to connect these characters. It's over. And I see a feather. And then I see another feather. And I'm like, I'm not listening to feathers. I mean, this is crazy. I'm a crazy person thinking I'm getting signs from feathers. And I go to my car and I have the moment where I'm like, have my head on the steering wheel, and I hear a tap. And I'm like, great. Some coworker is seeing me lose my mind in this car right now. And it was a crow. And it was tapping on my windshield. And I'm, holy cow. So I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this crow? And I Google ancient Greek mythology crow. And it pops up that Athena, before she had an owl, had a crow. And all crows were white. And she banished them from Athens and turned them black. I'm like, well, okay, and now I have a crow in my story. And it ends up that little scraggly, awful crow is in my story, and kind of carries the story. It kind of worked out serendipitously. Yeah, I love him. So thankful for the crow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you talked about kind of some mindset things and challenges that you've had to overcome about, feeling like you couldn't do it or that sort of thing. Like, I'm curious, as you consider your journey as an author, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome as you've been writing?
I mean, I started from zero baseline other than I knew I could write some words that made sense.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to publish. I didn't know what I needed. I made a lot of mistakes. I hired people to do things that I had to rehire someone else to do.
Mm.
I didn't know there were different kinds of editors. I didn't know anything about actually publishing.
Yeah.
I just knew that I was going to do it somehow. And if I was doing it for me, and if someone liked it, great. And some people do. So I'm really happy.
That's awesome. So you had to figure out all of the editing, publishing, all that stuff. You had to kind of figure it out on the fly as you were, like, once you wrote the book. I imagine you maybe, I don't know if you went through multiple drafts or whatever, but you're just kind of, I guess, going on the internet and figuring out how to do this stuff. Or how did you make some of those connections?
Yes. I searched and searched and searched, and I started out and kind of when you're just researching this on your own, all kinds of things pop up. And there's vanity publishers, and there's this and that, and then you kind of have to be a little bit savvy to know what not to do too. And
Yeah.
I just kind of said, no, this doesn't feel right. And I lucked into someone who helped me for very little money that I just met on a group on Reddit, I think it was, where I was just, down the rabbit hole of Reddit, and I reached out to this lady, and she said, well, yeah, I can help you format it, and you need an ISBN. I'm like, I don't know what that is, and you go to this website to get the ISBN and this to be copyrighted, and kind of guided me to the things I absolutely had to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, you could do traditional publishing and self-publishing, and I started looking at queries, and I was impatient, and I just wanted to hold this book because it was done, and I had edited and on and on and on. And I'm like, I just want to have it. And I looked at it more like, I knew that if you write one book, you're not going to make money. I know that it's a path, right? You need to be able to write several books and have an audience base. So in my mind, I thought, this is my learning book. How do I get things done? And that I would have that knowledge. So when I'm writing the next one and the next one, I know what I'm talking about. I know these words. I know what an ARC reader is and a beta reader. And I didn't know these things.
Yeah.
And I wasn't on social media before I had a book, other than mom Facebook groups. I didn't know Instagram. It was in the dark on a lot of things. So that's how I looked at it. Like, it's a learning opportunity. I'm going to go through the hard things now for the benefit later. And I'm proud of what I did. It's not perfect. It's perfect to me in every way because I did it. And I learned so much. It's unbelievable. And so many wonderful artists, writers, authors have helped tremendously in this. This group is a wonderful group of people that support each other.
I think that has been one of the more refreshing and eye-opening things that I've experienced as a writer and as a new podcaster too. Like, I, for the longest time, used to think that there was this category of people called creatives that was this like elite group that you had to be like born into, or like you had to have like a skill set that was just so unique and so through the roof. And I also kind of made the assumption that I'll never be invited into that. Like, that's just that's not me. That's not the path that I chose. That's not, that's for other people. It's not for me. But once I kind of dip my toes in those waters, I have found, particularly writers, but really all artists that I've interacted with, have been so welcoming and accommodating and helpful. And like, I just love that sense of like, we're kind of all in this together, and like, hey, here's some things I've learned along the way. Let me help you. Let me point you in this direction or make this connection for you. Like, I've just experienced so much of that in a really short period of time. And that has really been one of the things for me that's just like been so incredible. And it sounds like you've kind of experienced some of that too.
Oh, I wouldn't have known what to do after I wrote it if I didn't have people helping me. And that's part of when you're doing something like this. It's very easy to promote other people, but it's very hard to promote yourself. For me, it is. I can sing the praises because you feel like you're bragging. I mean, I can do this, but really, there's people who want to hear what you have to say, and you have to look at it as you're adding something to their life. You're adding value to their life. And I think it's amazing. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm happy to be a part of this community, very much so.
Yeah, that's great. What resources or things have you leveraged to help you on your journey? So I'm thinking about like books, podcasts, like groups that you've been a part of. Like what would you say if there are a couple of things that have been the most helpful for you that you would recommend to someone?
There are two books. One I read in my 20s called The Inner Game of Tennis. It's about tennis, but it's about your mindset, and it's about visualizing what you want, and it's about just having control over every piece of your brain and making it
Okay.
work at the right time.
Okay.
And it changed the way I thought when I read it in my 20s. I recommend it for anyone. It's about tennis, but it could be about a lot of other things than
Yeah.
tennis. And then I read a book last year called Falling Up, and it is written by a Franciscan monk mystic, and it is about how you can't go up until you fall down. And it's just really more about the second half of life and how you are just in a better place about life. If you can look at it in two ways: either I'm going to die and it's over, or you can look at it as I'm going to take everything I learned and share it, use it, express it. Those two are the two books that I think tremendously had an impact in my way of thinking.
Love it. I love it. I made a note of those and I'll link to them in the show notes too. I that's one of my favorite things is to connect people to resources that have helped other people on the show. So that's great. So this show I've shared with you is it's intended to encourage and inspire people who are at the early stages of the thing that they're working on. And for a lot of them, it's going to be people who are writing a book or some of them, maybe it's a business that they want to launch or a podcast or something of that nature. But from your perspective, since you're an author, what would you say? What would be kind of your best advice that you would give to someone who's either just starting out, or maybe they haven't even gotten to the point they're starting? They've just got the idea in the back of their mind, and they think maybe I should give it a try. What's the best advice or encouragement you would offer to that person?
To be truly authentically yourself, and your people will find you, and not to be afraid to fail, because you will, and not stop once you fail, and that's the only sin, I guess, is to not keep trying, because you won't make it. If not you, someone else will. So why not you?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Lori, this has been awesome. So I just have a couple of questions before I let you go. First, what's next? So you have your first book. It's already been published, right? It's out there in the world.
It is all over, worldwide distribution.
And what is the name of your book? I don't think I ever asked.
It is called Medromeda.
Okay, Medromeda. Awesome.
A mix of Medusa and Andromeda. If you're a mythology person,
okay. I am not, but some people will understand what that means, and that's great. And so what's next? Are you working on another one? Are you doing some other project?
I am. There's a character left hanging at the end of Medromeda.
Oh, cool.
If you read it, you'll know the character, but I will say Icarus was one of my favorite mythologies, and he makes an appearance. He's not the main character, but he'll make an appearance in the next book. And then after that, I think I'm going to write a YA hockey series.
Oh, cool.
Since I know hockey really well, and I know these 13, 14-year-old boys really, really well, I think I can garner some really good insight into what little hockey boys want. There's a lot of them out there. So I think that's the next time. The next
awesome.
one. Something for the kids.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so we'll look forward to that. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Last question before I let you go. How can people contact you and follow along with what you're doing? Do you have a website, social media? What's the best way to get in touch?
I am on Instagram, and it's Lore Wren author, at Lore Wren author. And I have a website, www.lorewren.com. I'm mostly on Instagram. That's kind of my place. And Threads. Instagram
awesome.
and Threads. Yeah.
I love Threads. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I will include all that in the show notes. And if you're listening, please go follow Lori, connect with her. This has been so much fun. I really thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, TC. It's been great meeting you.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.